My final guest is Congressman Brett Guthrie. Congressman Guthrie is the ranking member of the Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Health. Congressman Guthrie, great to see you. Peter Welch had some very nice things to say about you and your work, I should just say. You know, it's always nice to hear, you know, basically some bipartisan compliments going. I was asking Peter a minute ago about whether there had been a real shift between the Trump administration and the Biden administration in this area of trying to get drug costs down. And he said, no, you know, President Trump was quite good on this subject. He said the right things, he just had a hard time getting some of it going. In terms of getting it going, in terms of addressing, you know, particularly complex generics, but the healthcare picture of getting it to work better, of getting, you know, more drugs out into the marketplace to patients, what are the parts of it you think we should be focusing on?
Well, thanks a lot. And Peter is a good friend of mine. He's a great guy to work with. And, you know, example of he and I working together on these issues show that we can do these bipartisan. When I say a great friend, one day I saw him walking through the Capitol with a whole box of Vermont maple syrup. And I said, what are those for? And he goes, I bring these to my friends every year. So hopefully this year, since he said nice things, I'll get a bottle of that as well. So the things to do it together, I think that the biggest thing that's going to be moving forward is all of the user fees. So when we do GDUFA this year, we have the opportunity to really address this. And if you look at Hatch-Waxman, you know, it was really designed for simple generics, essentially a generic process that you make the same. You know, I've been in facilities, not necessarily pharmaceutical, where you would be surprised in some of the facilities you go to where you buy a brand name that costs more and a generic, and it's just simply a different label that moves down the pike, not necessarily in pharmaceuticals, but similar to that. Where these are just complex and deliver different. And so what we have to do is go through this, to hopefully have hearings with Chair Eshoo and move forward that GDUFA really be our vehicle to make changes in this. We sent a bipartisan letter to Chair Clemons, was the main author of the letter, to then Dr. Hahn. And Dr. Hahn said there may be statutory requirements available that we need change, and he didn't really identify them. But that's what the hearing process is for, and then we all work together to do this. And as you said, Peter and I have talked about this quite a bit. It really was an issue with President Trump. Unfortunately, we didn't get too far with it, but every time I would see Secretary Azar, I would talk about we need to deal with drug pricing, and he goes, you and the president, every time I see him, ask me, we need to deal with drug pricing. And just because of everything moving forward, and of course, the last year, the entire Health and Human Services and CDC and FDA being involved in the pandemic as they should be, we didn't really get to address these. But as hopefully we'll be on the other side of the pandemic as the vaccine is out, and GDUFA is the absolutely proper place for us to take actions on these issues.
Congressman, is there anything the FDA isn't doing that it should be doing?
Well, I think you talked with Tanya before. As I said, the process is really where, if you look at the vision of generics when they put Hatch-Waxman was, you know, it's essentially the same chemical. It can be, it goes in the body the same way. You look at the blood the same way. Some of these are really complex. They're different. So what the FDA, and we actually bipartisanly did this in the user fees last time. We had the pre-ANDA meetings, So the issue is, and I think Tanya talked about, you know, 2 or 3 different cycles to get these approved. Right. The more information the manufacturer has going in, the better off they're going to be, because then they know what to present, what the FDA is looking for. So I think it's communication, and I think they really improved it. But there's always opportunities to continue to improve, and I think the FDA has proven to itself. It's certainly proven to the world that when focused on an issue, they can get big things done. Just look at what they've done over the last year. And so hopefully we can take some of this momentum and as we talked with, I heard you talk with Tanya Winters just earlier, yeah. There can be no sacrifice in safety and efficacy, but we certainly can make things happen in terms of efficiency and speed.
Congressman, I used to work for a senator in the Senate, and you know Jeff Bingaman, and when he was asked me, he said, "Oh, Senator, years ago you wrote a letter to somebody," and I just always felt that was unfair. But I'm going to be unfair to you and ask you about a letter you wrote in February in 2020, and you wrote a letter to the FDA, and you were interested in some information on some recent approvals in generics, and you were asking, as I understand it, how they're meeting requests for complex generics. So I don't know if you remember this letter, but if you do, can you share with us what the FDA shared with you about their process, and you know what gave you heart in some of this and what concerned you?
Well, with the FDA, what they responded back is they really want to make this happen. I'm just trying to think of specifics of that letter, but I did read a response back. I believe the FDA really wants to make generic competition better. And so if you look at the history of the FDA, and I haven't been involved in them as long as some others, so maybe they've done this before, but it's about safety and efficacy. That's their mission. And so if it takes 10 years to get an EpiPen on the marketplace to make sure it's safe and effective, then that's kind of their pathway. But if you look, the essence that I wanted to get at is it became about the Drug Competition Action Plan, is that there is a role for the FDA to say, okay, let's see if we can be just as safe and just as effective, but also focus on the fact we need to get these to the marketplace as well. And I think that was the attitude, as Peter Welch said, that the previous president had. I think it's going to hopefully transfer into the current administration and the current HHS, that we can, that the FDA will say, we have responsibility for safety and efficacy. That's our mission. But we also have a responsibility to make sure that we aren't a roadblock to getting things to the marketplace. And I think that letter very openly, as I said a couple of things. If you look at the drug action plans, the FDA says we actually make a list of generics that don't have, of brand names that don't have generic equivalents, and therefore try to focus on those. So we, instead of getting more generics into the competition, because it may be easier to do, get more generics into approval because it adds to competition. And EpiPen is the best example of that whatsoever. The fact that it took 10 years, I don't know exactly why it took 10 years, but it doesn't seem like it should have taken that long. If it took that long because it had to be safe and effective, then that's proper. But my guess is we could have done that quicker.
Congressman, you're just such a cool wonk on these topics. I know we could talk about them all day, and I can tell you're really into the little narrow cubby holes and corners. But to that point, I think one of the interesting questions about the EpiPen story, I remember reporting on this story at the time, is one of the things I learned, it's uncomfortable for people to hear this, is it wasn't just Mylan in this case. There were other issues involved, the insurance companies, deductibles, pharmacy benefit. There were a lot of players in what goes into the price of a drug and the sensitivity of that in the pocket. I guess my question to you, and just meant very innocently, as we're trying to get the costs of drugs down, and one part of it is the generic industry, are there other parts of it that need to be wrestled down as well?
Oh, you're absolutely correct on that. And it was interesting, Chair DeGette and I was the O&I for Energy and Commerce ranking member last time. And we sat down and said, we really want to look at the overall cost of pharmaceuticals. And we chose insulin because almost every family is impacted by it. There's not any huge legacy research costs that has to be recovered, but insulin prices were rising. So we said, and we had a couple of hearings about the whole process, from the manufacturer to it got to the retail to it got to the customer. And we really were making, I think, some headway. And I think we can do these things these 2 years. And we can deal with the whole supply chain. We can deal with complex generics through the approval process. We can deal with like Medicare Part D reform and out-of-pocket responses. But what happened as we had some really good policies that we were beginning to formulate, then that became HR 3, which was an all-encompassing pharmaceutical reform bill. Some of us would say it was price controls in pharmaceuticals. I think what hurt the robust pharmaceutical industry we have. We need to make sure they're not excess profits and they're affordable, but we also want to make sure we have a robust pharmaceutical industry. Look what they've done over the last year. And so the question we'll get, are we going to have, and the majority gets to determine this, are we going to have one massive pharmaceutical reform bill that has little chance of passing the Senate and probably not being signed into law? Or are things we can focus on like a laser beam and make big changes? You reform the insulin price, it has a big impact on government. It also on the budget. It also has a huge impact on people's lives, which is important. Medicare Part D and these complex generics. So think if we had a focused process that got the types of like EpiPen into approval quicker, how much difference that makes in people's lives. And so I understand I was just listening to something earlier on baseball. It seems like they're trying to soften the baseball because everybody swings for the fence now in Major League, and understand why you want to score a touchdown on every play. But sometimes you get a lot of first downs, you get a lot of base hits, you make a big difference in people's lives.
I'm always paralyzed when my friends talk about American sports because the only sport I know anything about is sumo. I was raised in Japan, basically. But
I don't know anything about sumo, so that might be a good metaphor.
I can
don't
talk
know.
about Yokozuna and all of that. But I just finally ask in this question, I asked the sort of same question of both Peter Welch and also Sally Choi from the FDA, which is, where do you think gravity is taking us? Do you think GDUFA is it, I always ask the question is, if we're here in 2 years, did we largely get what we need to do? And were we largely moving in the right direction? Is the pipeline robust enough that it will make an impact on America and people's lives? Or do we have to is there a big lift out there? Is that GDUFA? So I could ask you the question, do you feel like gravity needs to be shifted a bit to get into the right place? And if so, what are those things? Is it GDUFA or is there more?
Well, I think GDUFA for complex generics. I think GDUFA is a vehicle moving forward, because a lot of times Congress, a lot of people say it's the best place in the world to get nothing. If you want nothing done, go to Congress sometimes.
Right.
But we have things that we absolutely have to pass, and we have to on time pass GDUFA, and so we know there's a vehicle leaving the station, a bus leaving the station, or train, whatever you want to just call it.
Right.
And so there's opportunities if we do our homework, and beginning back with our February letter, the responses from Dr. Hahn, looking at the new FDA program, we can really make changes. We get, a crack at every few years. And this is our opportunity and our time to make sure that we have in place and try to go through what is getting in the way statutorily for FDA and the pharmaceutical companies to bring competition to the marketplace. Because the way we're going to solve drug prices, in my opinion, without totally dismantling the pharmaceutical industry that we don't want to do, is let people compete. If somebody's charging excess money for a pharmaceutical, government can react to it, or government can bring other players into the marketplace. And I think that's the best solution, because it brings better products and is more robust and at a better price.
Well, thank you, Congressman Brett Guthrie, ranking member of the Energy and Commerce Subcommittee on Health. Thank you so much for joining. We can do this a lot of other times, too, so I hope you'll come back.
I would love to do it, absolutely. As we progress in this, we definitely should do this.
Thank you. Well, that brings us to the end of our program today. A big thank you to AAM for its support and all of you attendees for joining us for this discussion. For those of you who've missed any of the conversations, we will have a video up from the event on our website shortly. I'm Steve Clemons. Be well.